to be smart. You don't even need to know about costumes or anything. Anyone can mold a mask. It's that basic. But there are good few things to know, and that's why I'm here. So we want to, yep. I think I know. So this panel is produced by Cerberus Productions, which is me, Lindsay, Sharece in the beautiful Monster Hunter costume, and Shelby down the end, and Cammy. And then it's also co-sponsored by Propped Up Creations, which is Alyssa right here, and actually a couple of other members are in the audience, or maybe other members.
All the way in the back.
All the way in the back. So they help me out a lot, because they've actually used, there are a lot of curative chemicals out there, and between the two of us, even still, we haven't used all of them. So they help me out with stuff that I've never worked with before. So hopefully we can give you a pretty comprehensive panel here. Okay. Oh no, that first one's really important. Safety equipment. Okay, so I'm gonna stand over here. I'm sorry. So everything in this panel that we're casting is live, which means all of the materials and everything are liquid. They can get on stuff, and specifically they can get on your skin. And a lot of things, they don't look bad, they don't smell bad, and they don't even feel bad at first, but they can be dangerous. So if you're gonna come up, if you wanna touch anything, we do have gloves and safety equipment. So just be safe, don't be stupid. That's kind of what this panel is about. As far as safety equipment goes, I can tell you things I use. When I'm using anything that's described as noxious or corrosive, I use a respirator. You can get one for like 30 bucks at Lowe's or Home Depot. They're a little claustrophobic, so you kind of got to get used to it after a while. It circulates air through your face. It kind of feels weird, like something's forcing you to breathe. But you get used to it after a couple of minutes and stuff. And it really does, it is the only thing that really does protect you from noxious fumes out there. You know, you can wear the surgical masks and everything, but they just don't, all they do is filter particulates. So if you're sanding or if you're using a jigsaw or something, that's great. But they're not going to help you with noxious fumes. They don't filter fumes. So they don't do much. I always wear gloves. Always wear gloves. Even if it doesn't seem like it's a dangerous chemical. Even if it says it's body safe. Always wear gloves.
And make sure you know what material you're using when you choose which gloves you wear, because that will come up later. Just read all the information about the guys.
Exactly. And always long sleeves and jeans. You don't want to wear anything that's going to wick material because it'll end up just absorbing everything closest to your skin. So if you just want to wear like a standard t-shirt, long sleeve t-shirt, jeans, that's going to be your safest bet. All right, keep going. When working with blank, work in blank room. This is the first thought you should have before you open any container. Look at the container. Does it say it's corrosive? Does it say it's noxious? Does it say it's an oxidizer? These are the things to take into account. If it's not, if there's no caution or anything, the best thing to do is open room ventilation, which basically means closed or open room ventilation or room ventilation. Basically just means you're in a room larger than the size of a closet, and you're pretty comfortable with air circulation. You don't feel like you're breathing in the same air you breathed in 10 seconds ago. So anyone, standard kitchen, bedroom, den kind of area, that's an open closed room ventilation. A ventilated area means that you have direct exposure to the outside. So if you're using something corrosive or something noxious, like resins, definitely are the big one. You're going to want to use ventilated room, and there really is no such thing as too much ventilation. So the thing I always tell people is a garage is you're really the best bet, because you're still protected kind of from an insulated area, so the temperature doesn't get too wacky, but you have a lot of exposure to the outside, which means that you have constant airflow, and the air that is getting polluted is getting recirculated immediately. So you are the least at risk of being harmed. I wonder if it started curing. No. The answer is always no. Most materials give you the best guess. So like the opposite of a restaurant, when they tell you the wait is usually the most amount of possible time, the MSDS and the cure times are always the least, the perfect situation. If you were mixing exactly at 73 degrees Fahrenheit, and you mixed it perfectly 1-to-1, then it will cure in 40 minutes. Otherwise, no, it's going to take you 2 goddamn hours, and you're going to have to wait that entire freaking time wondering if it's cured. So if you have that thought, if you're sitting near your mold or you're positive and you're wondering if it's cured, it's not. Don't touch it. Next slide. All right, so there are a couple words that I'm going to continuously use, and I figured I'd just give you the benefit of the doubt and give you the definitions. Curing. I've already used it like a million freaking times, right? So curing is not like drying. Like if you put Elmer's glue on something and you want to wait for it to become hard, it's actually already the glue product. So if you made it wet again, you reintroduce heat, it would become the same glue that came out of the box. But curative chemicals, like a cake, are something that go through a chemical reaction, and they don't become the same product they were in the beginning. And there's no way to re-separate them back into their original parts. So things like 2-part silicone or polyester resins, where you have to add 2 things together to get a final product, are curative. And they become a different thing in the end. It's good to know. Next one. MSDS. This is the material safety and data sheet. And it comes with everything you buy. Everything. Even if it seems like something stupid like hydrogen peroxide. And I will tell you the MSDS for hydrogen peroxide is 12 freaking pages long. So nothing is as benign as you think it is. It's basically a sheet that tells you everything that's inside the chemical if it's not a raw element, and what it can do to you possibly, and what it can do to you if you're in the state of California. Usually it gives you cancer. We're in Massachusetts right now, so we don't have to worry about it. It's always good. It really is a lot of technical jargon. Usually it doesn't matter, but it's always good to at least take a look at it, because sometimes it gives you a really cool hint, like inhibits with latex or something, and then you know what not to use when you're using it, so that you don't waste your expensive material. Because some of these things are kind of pricey. Nobody wants to waste them. So it's always good to take a look at the MSDS. It's the little piece of paper that has the colorful red, blue, and yellow symbol on it, and it's, like I said, it's usually really long and obnoxious, but it's good to at least glance at it before you start working. Viscous is my favorite word. And it never means what you think it means. The word. Keep using it. Viscous measures the flow in a liquid. There are a lot of things in this world that don't seem like they're liquids, but they are, and they just have a very high viscosity. A lot of people use the word viscous just by itself to explain something, which isn't correct. Viscosity is actually a value. And so I will talk about things with low viscosity, things that are runny, like water, and things with high viscosity, which I refer to as cake batter, which they almost seem like they're solids, but they're still liquids. They're just very high viscosity. Undercuts. Undercuts are pieces of a positive that you're going to brush or cast in a mold that make it so the mold either needs to be 2 parts or one very complex part. And undercuts, they determine what kind of mold you're going to make. So when you're looking at your positive and you want to make a mold, you have to take into account, does this have severe undercuts? Does it have mild undercuts? Or does it have no undercuts? Something that is radially symmetrical, which I think is the next slide. Something that is radially symmetrical means that it's the same all the way around, like a sphere or a circle or a starfish. Those things can be considered with no undercuts. They're the same on all sides, and if you cast 2 of them at the same, or if you cast 2 different ones in the same mold, you could put them together and they would match up perfectly. Something that's bilaterally symmetric, like a person, that's going to have undercuts, because I have arms. And if you cast one side of me and cast it twice, you'd have the same side. You could not put them together because my front half on the other side would be on the back of me. Well, I'm not radially symmetric. So you have to think about that. Is it a sword? Is it going to be bilaterally symmetric? Do I have to cast in 2-part molds? Or is it going to be like a gem, which is half a sphere, and it's going to be radially symmetric, and I can cast it in 1 part? Pure inhibition. Alyssa and I joked a couple weeks ago that we clean out our inhibited molds with our tears. So pure inhibition is normally something that happens because you haven't mixed something enough. These chemicals are extremely unstable, and I'll give you credit for that. But usually they're not unstable enough to just react by like hanging out next to each other. You gotta mix everything. If you feel like you mixed it enough, mix it more. And then there are other things like we talked about earlier that can just cause inhibition. You've done everything right, but you worked with a material that causes inhibition. Latex is the biggest one.
Platinum silicone, the worst to work with. The mold for the goblet there, I cast, that's the third mold that I finally got a positive because I had that much cure inhibition on that piece. Sometimes you just have to stick with it, and eventually you won't have cure inhibition.
I had cure inhibition in brush-on urethane rubber, which is, I refer to as kink batter. I cleaned out those molds with my tears. They were destroyed, I could not use them. That was just being unlucky. They just didn't care. Sometimes that happens. Mold keys. Mold keys are, once you cast a two-part mold, once you finish the first part, it's usually like either little pieces of clay or maybe bolt tops that you put on before you cast the second part that, when fully cured, aligns the mold correctly. So you have these register marks that when you put them together, ensure that the mold is on top of itself in the right fashion so that you don't end up pulling the positive and it's kind of wacky or off and it didn't line up right. Mold keys make it so it all registers correctly. And you don't have to worry about alignment of the molds while it's curing because the mold keys keep it in that right place. And I use bolts to make mine. I just stick them on there and then pour the mold, the second part of the mold, and then I just pull the bolts out at the end of it, and there's these holes on one side and positives on the other that line up with it. Flush, rush, and cold. These are 3 ways to describe casting, and they're all different. Slush casting is when you pour a certain amount of positive into your mold and you move it around so that it gets all the sides of it. You usually do this for something that needs to be curved, like a mask. And instead of pouring a solid, it ends with kind of like a concave back to it. So you could wear it, or you could fill it with something. Brush, very obvious. This is when you use a brush to put the stuff on something else. Brush molds are usually when you just have the object sitting in front of you, and you brush it with the mold material, and you light it here, and you pull it from the back. And then cold, which Alyssa is actually kind of the resin expert on that, is when you cut your resin with a powder, like a metal powder, and you get a kind of metallic finish to it. And it's actually, the powder is metal, you can feel it in the container, it's heavy. But you cut the front layer of resin with a metal powder, and then you get kind of metallic feel and look to it, which is really awesome if you're doing something that's like a sword or anything that needs to really mimic metal, because you've incorporated metal into it. It gives it not only the look, but the feel. But it does increase your cure time.
And it's important to point out that this piece has no paint on it. So this is what it looked like after polishing it for quite some time with some steel wool, which we'll be demonstrating later.
I will say that don't be discouraged when you first pull a cold cast, because it doesn't look right at first. You gotta give it some love. And Alyssa will be talking about that later. Mother molding. So if you do like a brush cast of something very light, like a silicone, or maybe like a thin layer of urethane rubber, something that's kind of floppy, it won't hold its shape correctly if you don't give it a mother mold. It's also called a glove mold. But it basically is something hard and solid that the flexible mold sits in that allows it to keep its shape during cure, so you don't have to sit there and mold it. Usually mother molding is done in plaster or plastipaste or something solid, and it's never pretty. It doesn't look pretty at all.
That mother mold came up with this.
If you want to do something with a lot of detail, you use a flexible mold, but then you need to keep it in place while it's curing, so you use a mother mold on it. So that's the mother mold material I know of, and the cheapest is plaster. And you can get like a bucket, a gallon-and-a-half bucket at Michael's for like $9. I will say that, oh, that's legible. Yeah. You're welcome. I will say that it takes a long time to dry, it's heavy, and it's goopy. And then the other picture on there was Hank Gal, and that's just kind of plaster of Paris's redheaded cousin, the no stuff. It's definitely more solid, and it's less fragile, but it is hard to find, and it's more expensive, and it's just not worth it. All right. You guys can do that, right? You guys can just handle that.
Done.
Basically what this says is when you're working with plaster, you want to make sure that you pour the plaster into the water, not pour the water into the plaster. Because if you pour the water into the plaster, you've now created an uneven volumetric system where the solid is on the bottom and the liquid is on the top. No matter how much you've mixed it, you've left the solid on the bottom and the liquid on the top. If you pour the solid into the liquid, you can make a more homogeneous system going on, where it forms a kind of mass, like an island, in the middle of your mixed container. And once you start seeing that solid forming on its own, you can give it a gentle mix, and it'll happen naturally instead of you having to like churn butter inside your mixing container. And then once you do that, and once it's all homogeneous and it's all white and gooey and slurry, when you want to pour it, you can either brush it on, and then you don't even have to listen to what I'm saying now. Just, I call it brushing it on, but I kind of just stick my hands in the bucket and like drop it on top of the mold. So you can goop it on, or you can pour it into something. And if you're going to pour it, the less air you add to any system, the better, because air bubbles will always get you, and they will always ruin a perfectly good mold, or perfectly good positive. So you want to pour in one spot and let it naturally use gravity to fill up the rest of the container. You move it around, you've then introduced a lot more air. So you don't want to like run it back and forth or around in a circle. You just want to leave it in one spot, the deepest spot in the mold, and let gravity fill it up from there. Oh, also, it's going to feel wet for like 3 days. That's normal. It takes a really long time for this stuff to dry. The best thing to do is leave it on the sun. All right. This was supposed to be the slide where I tell you what I'm talking about in this panel. And then I don't think I really finished it. Sorry. So yeah, we're going to talk about mold. Mold materials are the part that comes inside the mother mold but outside the positive. And they're the flexible part. So I'm going to talk about urethane, rubber, and platinum silicone. But I don't know if we have anything else that we're going to talk about.
Urethane? Well, urethane.
Urethane, rubber, and platinum silicone.
Well, plaster can also be used.
Yeah.
That, so.
You can use plaster as a standard mold if what you're making doesn't need to be super detailed, because plaster doesn't capture the best detail. Neither does anything like plastic yeast or something like that. Like, it's hard and it's solid, and you don't need a mother mold for it, but it's not going to be very intricate. Platinum silicone is my favorite. So I use Rebound 40, but Alyssa uses Rebound 25. So we have kind of an orange goo, green goo pour. I love the green goo. It's okay, I'm gonna back up a little bit. The numbers on any smooth-on product refer to densities. So if you're getting a higher density, you're getting a firmer, less intricate final. So I use a less intricate final because I like the solidity of the mold. Something like Rebound 25 is going to give you much more detail, but it's going to give you less tensile strength. You're going to be really gentle with the mold and the mother mold. So I kind of like the added bonus of being able to handle my molds a little bit more. I did a terrible job at this. I could read it when it was in front of me on my computer. So platinum silicone is probably the easiest chemical to work with. You can pretty much just pour two of them together and it'll cure. I mean, it takes a lot to inhibit silicone. Latex would probably be it.
And sulfur.
Sulfur, yeah, you can't use sulfur-based clays. You can't use like terracotta or anything like that because sulfur. Yeah, I brought in my plastiline. This is really the best clay to work with. The soft, medium, hard, extra hard refers to the detail you can get with it. The harder you get, the more intricate detail will be captured in the clay. The softer, the easier it is to work with, but the less detail you do to capture in the clay. So with platinum silicone, the best thing you can do is mix the two parts separately, part A and part B, in separate containers, bring them together, mix them, and then do what's called double final or triple final. And it's when you pour your final mix into yet another clean container, mix it again, and then use it. This means that any contamination from the first final will be mixed out, plus you put the top on the bottom. And so you've made sure that you've mixed everything into that double final. You gotta make sure the container's cleaned up, because everything I just said would be not true. Oh no, go back! Once you've poured it, or once you've brushed it, it's gonna feel like a light viscosity. It's gonna be kind of like honey or pancake batter, or maybe a little bit lighter than pancake batter. It's not really that thick. It's like honey, yeah. And when you touch it, it will like stick to your glove and come up when you bring your finger up. That's the clear indication that what you're doing is not cured. So what you want to do is leave your platinum silicone for like 40 minutes, 50 minutes.
You want to get the first layer tacky before you put your second on.
You don't want to brush liquid onto tacky. So if your mold is tacky and you want to put like a slush cast or fill it with resin, you can't put the liquid resin into a tacky mold because your mold will fall apart when you try to demold it. So you want to brush liquid on tacky, and you want to pour liquid into cured. I have the finished mold.
Okay, well, silicone takes forever to cure.
Yeah. So it takes 40 minutes for tacky cure, which means you can brush another layer on it. That takes 16 hours to cure for a working cure, which means that you can pour something into it. So I have it here if you guys want to see what the two parts look like, but it's not going to be cured. And I have, you guys can come up.
Yeah, you can come up after or before. What I'm holding up right now is a daughter mold and the mother mold, and this is a Rebound 25. What we have some here are your Rebound 40s.
Yes.
And we also have some other pourable silicones that aren't brushable silicones here. This example is Mold Star and a whole bunch of other silicones here. There's, when you are going to buy something, you need to figure out how exactly brush on or pourable, which starts with what mold you need.
Yeah, so if you're gonna brush on, it's gonna end up kind of looking ugly like this without the mother mold. So if you have like a one-shot piece that has like a flat back to it, you can brush it on. But if you have something that, well, this is a flat back too, but I just really wanted a container so I could preserve it longer. If you want to pour something, you need to have some sort of container or a mother mold like this one is.
And for some pourable silicones, you can just do it in the bottom of a cup. You can see this one still maintains the lines of the solo cup, but it works.
Solo cups are pretty much the greatest thing for holding and casting. Yeah, like you can get them like 50 at the dollar store for $1. Nope, really on my game today. And they'll last you forever, and they won't inhibit anything because they're made out of plastic. They're made out of polyethylene plastic, and they're cheap. And they're always the right size, because if you fill it up all the way, you got a lot, since everything's a 50-50 mixture, or mostly, because sometimes it was 90-10s. But you know, for the most part, it's pretty much a part A, part B, one-to-one situation. So if you fill up a solo cup, and you add it to another one, you really do have a lot of stuff there. So you can cast a lot with solo cups. They'll sell you containers at like Reynolds and Smooth On for $9 a container. No, you don't need that. That's not a thing. But this is my Rebound mold, and my mother mold here is actually this little container I got from Michael's for like $3, and it has a cap that I didn't bring, but it does have a cap, and so I can put the cap on it and keep it forever, and I'll never get moisture in it or anything. So that's a way to avoid having to do it. If you want to pour a mold, you don't want a mother mold, or if you want to pour but you don't want to make it acrylic box, because sometimes it's a pain in the butt, you can use little Tupperware containers. I've used them quite a bit. So, next slide. Urethane rubber. Oh, this is my bread and butter right here. Urethane rubber started off as legitimately the worst material I've ever used in my entire life. Everything was inhibited. I couldn't get it to cure for my life. And it always ended up like still sticky when it was fully cured. Side fact, if something is sticky 24 hours after it cures, it's going to be sticky forever. So there's always that hope, like maybe it'll get solid if I wait 3 more days. No. Cure is cure. If you've hit the cure time and it's still sticky, that's the way it's going to be. And that's a mixing problem. That's something that can be cured. Good mixing habits. I'm so sorry. So urethane rubber is a very dense, very high viscosity material. I actually brought my brush on 50 because being the non-committal person I am, brush on 50 is actually the midpoint between brush on 40, brush on 60, so it's exact middle density. It's great. It's great if you want to cast, okay, got it. It can be a solid final piece, like a positive, or it can be a mold. You can use it for both. And that's true for silicone too, as we got demos up here of silicone pieces that are final pieces. But brush on and pour urethane rubber do come with several caveats. Most of them involving mixing. Have to mix part A and part B separately for like 2.5 minutes each, at least. Part B is the worst. It is cake batter. It mixes like frosting. It's impossible to get the stuff out of the freaking container, let alone mix it all up. So the best thing that I've learned to do is just to get some So Strong urethane pigment, which we have up at the table here. They're in these tiny little dropper bottles. And drop some of that in, because then you know when you've homogeneously mixed the rubber, and if you're using it for a mold, you don't really care what color it is. So if you drop some of that in, you mix it up until it's pink or blue or whatever you put it in, and it's all the same color and you're not getting any streaks of that translucent liquid, you've mixed it enough and you know it. So that's tricks of the trade. Part A is liquid. It's a completely low viscosity, standard watery liquid. It's not really water. It's a little bit thicker than water, honey-like liquid. Once you add that to part B, you have a much more workable solution. But until you get to that point, part B sucks. And I feel you. Oh, you didn't. Okay, so you mix the two separately. You put them together in your single final. Put them again into a double final, like we just talked about. And the best thing you can do with urethane rubber is to then do a triple final. Because you can't mix this stuff. It's just, you can't possibly, in a gravity-oriented, one unidirectional pattern, mix this enough that it will cure. So if you flip it over once, mix it, and then flip it over again, you pretty much ensure that you're going to get a good cure. The cure time is long. It cures, I mean, in order to even get this stuff tacky, it takes a good hour, maybe an hour and a half. And then in order to get it solid, it says 16 hours, that's definitely more like 24. And it's brutal, because it's going to feel sticky, and it's going to get dusty, and it sucks. But the material is fantastic. If you want something solid, but flexible, wearable, but you know, it's not gonna, it doesn't have really high tensile strength. So you can put some pretty intense wear on it without it ripping, because silicone, it has low tensile strength. So if you get even a little tear in it, show us rip enough. Urethane rubber is not that. So it's worth working with the nightmare that it is to get the product that you get. I will say, if you use it as a mold, it shrinks during cure. So if you're using it as a brush-on material or a pour-on material, and your positive, your original, is very fragile or delicate or has a lot of intricate details, this is not the material for you. This is not what you want. Urethane rubber will either shatter it, or when you pull it, you will have to break the pieces to get it out. It's going to hold on to dear life for your positive, and it has a lot of surface tension. So once it sticks to something on the side, it forms almost a vacuum. So whatever box you put it in, you usually have to disassemble the box, or really get like a crowbar-like object to at least get one wall free so that you can rip the rest of it out. It really gets a good hold on everything. So I tried to cast something delicate in it once, and it was just a disaster. Even without me touching it, it had shattered inside the mold, and I had to take the little glass pieces of this stupid snowflake. I was trying to make a Christmas ornament. You actually brought the mold. The mold came out beautiful, but the original is gone. You can go to the next one. All right, these are the stuff you pour inside the mold. So this is going to be the final part. So the first one I think is one. You can go to the next slide. Oh. Got me. Warning, most things you pour inside of a mold are caustic, noxious, and really, really bad to get on your skin. So, horror story, if you get resin on your skin, it's like a sugar burn, because you have to wait to get it all out until it cures. If you try to get it off while it's still curing, it's all liquid, it's going to leave a residue on your skin, and then you get to scrape off that layer once it's cured. The best thing you can do is not freaking have your skin exposed. Second best thing you can do, should you have your skin exposed, is to wait. Don't try to like scrape it off, because you're going to end up with this residue all over you, and then you get to peel off the top layer of your skin. Great. Always wear like a respirator, something like that. Work in open room ventilation or ventilated room ventilation, because this stuff is bad. It's noxious and it's smelly, and it's not gonna lie. It would kill you if you like drink it or something. It could, but just be smart about it. If you open it up and you're like, wow, that smells horrible, then wear a respirator or something, because bad smells are nature's indicator that what you're working with sucks. That's polyester. I don't know for that. Yeah, there's actually more than that. I did a terrible job. All right, foam.
Foam is me. All right, so foam is one of my new favorite materials. Here's an example of something you can do with expanding foam. It's actually flexible mask that you can fit on over your head, which doesn't actually fit on over my glasses, but
So anyone that watches Doctor Who can.
Yeah. So, but you can also use it in something very, very small, such as this pommel, which we're going to be demonstrating right now. And originally this was done in a resin, in a hard resin, but the wondrous things about foam is that when in the end it can be both flexible and light. So, for example, if you need a prop sword, it's a very good option. If you need a pommel and you need something that's going to be really light, it's an excellent option. If you need a mask to pick up a lot of detail, it's an option. One thing you want to make sure is that, as in all of the other materials, you are wearing your proper materials. You're wearing your mask, you're wearing your gloves. The cure time on foams, they say 4 hours. We're actually going to demonstrate one right now and then probably unmold it at the end of this battle, so like 30 minutes. It stops expanding at around the 20-minute mark, and then is not tacky, like you can, it's safe to demold at about an hour to 2 hours. You should, by all means, leave it in the mold for a full 4 hours, but I do want to show you something of the final bit. So what I'm going to do right now is tell you what Lindsay has told you about mixing is excellent. With foam, ignore everything she said. Because the thing with foam is you need to go really, really, really fast. Expanding foam, you have 30 seconds by the time part A touches part B to put it in your mold. You need to mix it fast, you need to mix it furiously. It's basically you're whipping it together. And it expands, so you need to know the rate of expansion. What I'm using today is going to be a Flex Foam 10, which is approximately 4.5 times expansion. Now I have measured this mold, the interior of exactly how many ounces fit in this, and it's about 30. And the way I measure my molds is I put it in rice.
Oh, rice, okay, I use water.
Yeah, you can, well...
Because it's in a measuring cup, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean you can...
Start with a measuring cup, pour a amount in
exactly.
it, and then you know what you've used.
So for me, I'm going to put in 4 ounces of part A and part B, so 2 ounces of each.
What we both also determined is if you're using solo cups, those lines on the solo cups that tell you like how big a shot is, those are really good for, for knowing how much you've used in each one. you know, if you're using a standard like plastic cup, it doesn't come built in with those awesome lines that tell you how much is in each container. Also, Alyssa's being like really modest about foam, but for those of you who play Mass Effect, she made a full Rex costume out of this stuff. And it's amazing. So if you go on Propped Up Creations website, or if you go on their Facebook, you can see this like epic creation.
One of my favorite things about foam is that you could headbutt people with Rex.
And it was comfy too. I put on the Rex head, and it was not abrasive or anything. I didn't feel like I was going to die. You know.
All right. For the purposes of this example, because I have to speak, you're not going to be hearing me if I put this on. So I should be wearing a respirator. I am going to wear gloves because everybody should wear gloves. But the first thing you do when you're mixing foam is that you need to take your part A and your part B and you need to shake it. You want it pre-mixed when it comes out of the jug, because if you just pour it from the top, you're only getting unbricked stuff. So that's step one of everything. So,
since foam is plastic with air, introducing air into foam is not a bad thing, which is why you're able to whip the crap out of it and not really see any problematic results. Should you rip resin or rubber or silicone, you will have air bubbles all over the place, and it'll be sad and you will cry.
all right, part A, part B, evenly mixed. The lines are very, very valuable. It's about 2 ounces of each. Because this is about 30, one thing you should know when you're mixing foam is that if you want to get a really, really high rise, if you want to get the most out of your mix, you need a drill mixer. Hand mixing only goes so far. You're going to get less expansion with a hand mix than you will for a drill mix.
For the reference, drill mixer, it's the one with the little trigger, like an automatic mixer. Okay. For reference.
Yeah. She was on earlier.
It looks like a drill, but at the end of the day, it's a mixer.
Okay.
And like anyone, yeah, you can come on over and stuff if you guys want a better review. Feel free to.
So, one of the things that I had done earlier when I demonstrated what the mold was, when I pulled out the basic interiors, what I did is I put on our ease release, which is extremely important. Silicone doesn't stick to very much, but it will stick to other silicone, and if you want to extend the life of your mold, even if you're not using silicone, you should use a release.
Actually, sorry, I actually have a mold here, which is my OOPS demonstration, which is what happens when you don't use mold release, and as you can see, there's crap in it, and I can't cast anything in it because it's going to be covered with crap. So if you're casting resin, or sorry, if you're casting urethane into urethane, like urethane resin into urethane rubber, you're going to want to use the universal mold release because it's heavier and it's thicker, and it's going to put a barrier between two things that really want to stick together. If you're doing something like resin into platinum silicone, a standard is release 200, which is the lowest density mold release. That'll be fine.
This is step 2. Oh yeah, sure. Step 2, after you've done your shake of these, you're pre-mixing the part A and part B again in separate containers. You don't at this point want them to touch each other because again, 30 seconds. So when once you have it pre-mixed, I've actually tinted it. This So Strong tint works with these foams, so it's a great way to tint it all the way through. For the Rex head, I actually didn't paint most of his head. Like, that was just the tint. Oh. So
most of these materials don't paint well. Rubber, silicone, they don't paint great. You can use
foam acrylic, surprisingly.
Yeah.
So
foam paints well, but anything kind of flexible rubbery, you don't have time. You can put spray paint on it, kinda. It'll flake off a little bit. You can use cellulopaint, kinda. That stuff sucks.
Well, talking about painting though, I mean, this is an example of something that was tinted first. Like, here's the first tint. It didn't go dark enough, so it was a pink tint. And the next time we did a second part, and it was our darker hand. And this is thanks to my partner in the back. You want to wave your hand again? This is her Plymouth dragon arm. So, yeah.
Ooh, indeed.
And that was painted with tints. So, All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do here.
Oh, I don't know if you do this for foam, but for anything, for rubber or silicone, you always tint part B. Tint goes in part B. Just usually the more viscous of the two liquids.
I can have that. What I'm gonna do is set it somewhere, so it's just gonna be by itself. And actually, I wish I had my box. Is there my smoothing box?
This one?
Yeah, we're just gonna take this out and use it as a base because foams upwards. So what you want to do is just create a place you can stick your mold. Sometimes you can create a box, but this will work just fine because.
Oh yeah, she was talking about the box, by the way, not what was in the box. We're literally using the box right now.
There's a box in front that says smoothon.com on it.
Oh yeah, that's holding my urethane rubber, my plant silicone.
Okay, yeah, so that's fine, and you just want it to foam upwards. So for foam, I've pre-mixed part A and part B. First thing I'm going to do here, I'm just going to mix this in part A all the way in here, try to get as much as I can, and then I'm going to start counting. So, because as I said, you only have a certain amount of time to get this right.
Well, you guys can count.
All right.
3, 4, 5, 6,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Oh wow. And the reason why we were able to do that so quickly is because we prepared. We put this one here. We had part A and part B mixed. We knew where we were going to put it. We knew when. And we had the second pour ready. We knew when we were going to pour into the next one. For foam, I always do 12 seconds, and then I pour into a second one, and I whip it in the second one. And around 27, 28, I pour into the next. So, and then you just wait. And it's foaming a little at the bottom. It's going to be about 20 minutes before it gets its full foam, and I didn't grab as much as I can here, but you can see the bottom of this cup only had a little tiny bit of liquid, and it's already foaming up. So even your refuse cups will be foamed up.
Also, we're not like rich here, so as you can see, we're using solo cups and popsicle sticks to mix things. So I don't feel like you need to be elegant about this.
And here's a hint. When you are doing a brush-on silicone or like a regular silicone and you're using your solo cups, keep those. Silicone cures, you can pour it, take it, rip it out of the cup and then just reuse your cup for a resin or something else later. So try to use as much your materials wisely.
Yep, anything flexible, so platinum silicone, urethane rubber, foam, it'll cure solid enough that you can just kind of peel it outside of the cup. You can reuse the final cups, and that's a good way to know which one's your finals, because you don't want to ever clean out a part A or part B cup unless you're going to be reusing part A and part B in it. You'll cause contamination into the cups, and you can possibly inhibit your cure.
What's that mold made of?
This mold is a Rebound 25 on the inside. On the outside, you can pretty much do anything for a mother mold. And this is actually a Bondo fiberglass mother mold. So I ran out of plaster paste, and I needed something in a pinch, and I didn't have any plaster, and this is what I got. So
you can actually also, like, as far as things that come in strip format go, plaster bandages are a really good way to make a mother mold. 3 layers of those things, you're good to go.
okay.
So we're just let's come back to that later. Oh, by the way, this picture on the bottom, is it flex foaming or the?
Yeah, that's flex foaming. So
Yeah,
you can see that's 8 ounces poured into 32, which, yeah.
So you can see how much the expand ratio is. The first one being like was 1.15, and then goes up to 1.5.
Yeah, it's
1
the
to 2.
density down. So FlexFoam 25 and 17 Self Skin 10 also has some really nice skin and foam, but the further you do it down, the more bubbles you get in it. So the more useful it will be in the inside of something rather than the outside.
Okay. We can keep going.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I said.
All right, this one's me.
Okay.
So I was all ready to go with this too. I was totally gonna cast something in polyester resin here, and then I realized that you guys probably want to live. So, so polyester resin is by far the most noxious product I have ever come in contact with. It is, these are actually two gems I cast in it, and these are just right out of the mold cast. You can see that they still have the little bubbles on them and stuff. But I will say, polyester resin, that's the stuff that you get at Michael's in the metal containers, and it comes with a tiny bottle of hardener, also known as catalyst. It's really, really abrasive stuff. Definitely wear a respirator. I mean, you'll know when you open the container and you smell it, you're gonna be like, this is wrong, I should put something on my face. This is really bad. And you need to mix it really, really well. And anything that's noxious like that and dangerous like that you need to mix pretty solid, always wear goggles too. Or just like any kind of eyewear. Not your glasses, you don't want to get resin on your glasses. But any kind of safety goggles or something like that, lab goggles, you just don't want to get this stuff on your face in any fashion. So I always try to really get a good cover on my face if I'm going to work with polyester resin. This is the stuff that I use. It's it's by Cast and Craft, and it comes in this metal container. And you have to buy the catalyst separate, and it comes in like a really tiny 1 ounce bottle, 2 ounce bottle. And this is the first thing we're going to talk about that is not 1-to-1, and I think it might be the only thing we talk about that's not 1-to-1. Oh yeah, bond is not 1-to-1. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You can go to the next slide. So when you're mixing and pouring polyester resin, you want to pour your resin first into a container. And you're going to want to mix it and really get it. You'll notice immediately the bubbles start forming. Those are not dangerous bubbles. That's just resin. Or that's actually just polyester resin. Just really get a good mix going because you're adding something very small to something very big volume-wise. And so you're going to have to really open it up and get it really going. And mixing also adds heat, so it causes a natural expanding of the material. And so it'll be really ready for that catalyst when you add it. The amount of catalyst you add is dictated by the thickness of what's in the cup. So when you look at your mold and you look at this and you think it's about a ½ an inch thick or so, no, because what was in the cup was 1 inch to 1.5 inches of liquid. And so I had to add catalyst in regards to that because it's going to start the curing process in there, not in my mold. And I want everything in that cup to cure, not just what comes into the mold. I want to be able to use all of it. So when you look at it, pour into the container. If you're using 2 inches or 3 inches of liquid, go refer back to the container of resin, and it'll tell you 2-inch thick cast, add 7 drops. Then disregard that, because you usually got to add at least double. So for this, So for this it said add 6 drops. So I added 12 on the first one and 13 on the second. I got the same result. If you add too much, your molds will crack. The positives, this part, well, it's curing because it causes a kind of supersaturation to occur. So there is a delicate balance, but normally you'd have to add a lot to have that happen. So if you look at it, it says 6 to 8 drops and you add 16, you're fine. What happens during cure is really weird. It is not like, it's not like glue or anything. It doesn't get that solid layer on the top and then liquid on the bottom. It actually becomes what I call resin jelly. And you can pull resin jelly out of a mold. And the cool thing you can do with resin jelly is if you need something to be curved, you can demold resin jelly and put it into like a mother mold or something that is curved, and you'll end up with a curved final product. So if you pulled this out of the mold with resin jelly and folded it to be curved, you could then put it on something like an arm piece that's rounded, and it wouldn't have that wacky like straight piece on round object kind of looking thing. Resin jelly is extremely toxic. Don't eat it. Don't breathe near it. It's still curing, and it's hot. So, you know, if you're gonna mess with resin jelly, wear gloves, wear a respirator, wear safety goggles. I'm gonna repeat myself a lot with that because I really mean it. I've gotten resin burns before, and it's not fun. When you want to add color, as I clearly have done here, this stuff casts clear. It's one of the only things that casts clear that you don't need to use a pressure chamber for. Smooth On makes crystal clear. Also noxious, horrible, smells like death. And it will get air bubbles if you don't put it in a pressure chamber. But if you want to add color to polyester resin, it just comes in these little tiny dropper containers. You just add them 1 drop at a time because a little goes a long way, and that's true with So Strong and with polyester pigment. A little goes a long way. So you add 1 drop, mix it up, it's not quite the right color, add another drop, mix it up, not quite the right color, and then you just keep going until you get the deep color, the saturation you want. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
When I was doing Rex's eyes, I actually did several attempts on this material, and I actually used food coloring was one of my tests. So food coloring works, So Strong also will cure in this. There's a lot of different colors, additives that will cure in this.
Yep. Food coloring does not work in anything else.
Yes.
Do not message me asking why food coloring didn't work in platinum silicone, and why it didn't cure either. Yeah, moisture in platinum silicone will inhibit cure. So the thing to remember about tinting resins, tinting clear resins, is it going to be sitting on a backing, or is it going to stand by itself like a necklace? If it has a backing, you'll notice that the saturation of the color is a lot deeper than if I just held it up to the light, where it kind of gets, it looks a little pinky. But when I put it on a backing, especially a metallic backing, it then becomes kind of a blood red, which is what I was going for from a blood custard. So you also have to take that into account. When you're mixing it in the container, you're getting what it looks like with a backing. So it's going to look really dark, and it's going to look great. And then if you pour it into your mold, you pull it out, and you realize it's too light, it's because you didn't get quite the right view of the material you're working with. So if it's looking really dark in the container, but you know it's going to be kind of like held up to the light like an ornament or something, maybe add a couple extra drops of color because it's going to come out really light. The light definitely shows the lack of saturation in pigment. These are going to be on the table, so you guys, they're completely cured, so you don't have to worry about dying or anything.
Everything over here is cured.
Yeah. Also, the local Smooth On distributor, Reynolds in Brighton, all those little discs on the front of my table there, those are free samples. And if you don't know exactly what you want to work with, and you go there and you're like, I want to work with brush-on urethane rubber, but I don't know if I want 40 or 60, they'll give you these free samples, and you can feel it and mess with it, and you'll get to see, oh yeah, this is kind of heavy, I don't want that. Or, this is kind of light, I don't want that. This is just right, this is what I want. And you'll get to make the decision before you make the wallet decision. Because you don't want to buy a gallon of something that you don't want to use. The next part, actually if you go, before we go to one-to-one resins, there's another product that's a not one-to-one ratio, and it's called Rondo, and I've actually never worked with it, but Sharece has, and so she's going to talk to you about that.
Okay, Shelby's actually going to hold up the piece that I recently did. I don't know if we have any Diablo fans in here, but I recently made Material, Archangel of Justice, completely out of Rondo. I'm actually going to talk a little bit about Bondo first, which may be a more familiar name for you guys. Bondo is actually a car filler. The people at Home Depot and Lowe's will look at you like you're insane if you tell them what you're using the Bondo for. Don't ask them to help you. It's in the paint aisle near spray paints, right next to where you can fiberglass. Lowe's, Home Depot, if anybody's military, Lowe's gives you 10% off. Basically, Bondo is the thickest stuff you will ever work with. Stirring it is like stirring cement. It is horrific. I was out putty knife, right? It's terrible.
Yeah. And it's like, but at least you use the color indicator.
It does, yeah.
I use a putty knife. I put it on like a flat surface and like fold it on top of itself.
Yes, I got a paint chipper, little metal spackle, and just stirred it. The fun thing about Bondo by itself is you can put Bondo on almost anything. I'm sure you've seen a lot of Halo costumes, Gears of War costumes. Most of those guys use a Bondo mixture. Bondo, it's not a one-to-one. What it is you've got the main, gallon, let's say, and you put some of it in a red solo cup because those are the best in the world. You want to start small with Bondo projects because once you add the cream hardener, which comes with it, I always buy at least 2 extra because I'm the kind of person that likes to work a little more fast-paced. I wouldn't suggest that for people doing it for the first time. I'll add a little bit more cream hardener than it tells you to. The way you'll know if it's the consistency in which you can start using it is it'll be an off brown color. Bondo itself starts out as kind of a white-gray color. You add the dark red catalyst, it'll come out kind of a pink. What Shelby has in her hand is actually a method called pepakura. It is paper crafting. You get a 100-pound cardstock paper, which can be found at most craft stores. Shelby doing a very good job here presenting this. And what you'll do is you'll first mix, I start with the bottom line in a red solo cup, so I'm going to use a not red solo cup, but this cup to show you. See the little lines on there, right? Red solo cup starts with the bottom line right there. I fill up to there with my Bondo using that horrific spackle to put it in. Once you fill it, and you're not going to be able to accurately measure Bondo into a cup because it's so thick. You will spend so much time, you don't want to pull your hair out. So I just do one glob at the bottom until it goes just about to the line. And then I'm going to add 2 swirls of the red green hardener, mix it up. At this point, to do the rondo, in which Lindsay was telling you about, which is this, you're going to add fiberglass resin. Right next to Bondo at Lowe's or Home Depot. Fiberglass resin comes with a catalyst. You don't need that. You need to add about 2 parts of fiberglass resin to 1 part Bondo. Mix it up with a super cheap popsicle stick because you don't want to spend a lot of money. And then you're going to add that cream hardener. Mix it all together. The consistency that you want to use to put onto something like this is going to be very, very runny. And you're going to notice as you start to play with it that if you put too much of the Bondo in, you're going to get that thick consistency, and when you start to brush it on, you're going to get some big chunks, and if Shelby just kind of flips it to the side, there you go. See those right there, pushing up like that? That is what happens if it's too thick. And then you're going to spend 16 hours sanding paper, and then when you sand a hole in your paper, you're going to want to cry. You're going to play for hours. Yeah.
Just to add on, if you tell the people at Home Depot that you're painting your house, you can get those paint sticks for free.
Yes.
You tell them you're painting your house. I'm painting my kitchen. I'm really going to need a lot of those.
I don't know what color. I'm getting 15 different paints. All the sticks.
It's kind of a Jackson polish.
So just to kind of reiterate, because I'm still fairly new to a lot of the things that Alyssa and Lindsay were talking about, it can be really overwhelming. It's like I have 72 choices and they're all pretty much the same kind of thing. And I'm just like, what? So as a beginner, someone who isn't really too comfortable with making molds, but they really want to make like a big piece of armor, this is phenomenal for a beginner cosplayer. Because you can find these 3D rendered models online. Like Halo has its own wiki. It's like, I want to be Master Chief, there you go, print out, you're done. That's it. And you just glue it all together and there's a big piece of armor in front of you. At which point you will mix all that together, spread it on. I do 5 layers. Most people will say 2 to 3. They use something called fiberglass cloth. Well, let me tell you about fiberglass cloth. It's a wonderful thing.
It's glass.
It's glass.
It's like a piece of fabric that's made out of glass.
It is.
It's not the most fun object in the world.
Yes, it's not. And if you forget one tiny little piece and then you slip that Master Chief on, you're not a master anymore, dude.
Oh, yeah. Who's it? Itchy. Yeah, itchy. Yes. Itchy is the word. Because all the pieces of glass get on your skin and you're like, oh, I want to get them out.
Well, it's kind of like the same stuff as that pink insulation. It's made of glass.
It is. You put it in your house. Like,
it goes on your body. You don't put it on your body.
No, I had a friend, and this is a horror story to dissuade you from thinking that you can just toss all this fiberglass cloth on there. I had a friend who had to get 72 stitches in his abdomen from one small piece. He pulled it and them open. So, easier method that doesn't include gutting yourself is to use about 5 layers on top of the 100-pound cardstock with 2 parts to each 1 part resin, which is a Bondo. So, for painting it on, you can get a bag of disposable paintbrushes, just the little guys, right, for about $5 at Home Depot or Lowe's. Really cheap. My preference, like she was saying before, is to always use the red solo cups for measuring. Bottom for the Bondo, about the second one for resin. If you're wanting to do 3D rendering for this Peppercura, for the love of God, don't try to do it yourself. The program is a computer program made for people who know what they're doing, but you can find wikis. Don't be afraid of YouTube. Don't be afraid of Google. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
YouTube is like
YouTube is
the
phenomenal.
The best. You can find every. You're like, oh man, I really want to make something like I don't know. I really want to make Diablo's face out of urethane rubber, and like you'll go on YouTube and someone has done it. They've done it. And they will walk it out for you, step by step.
Since we're tossing out places to go, I also highly suggest the RPF.
RPF. DIY forum, definitely.
Yes, use their search tool. Someone has tried a technique and done it. It's sometimes a little intimidating there because the level of people is amazing. So we're getting a time thing on the back, so we're
yeah, so we'll go really quick through the last parts. One-to-one resins are the easiest thing to work with. They're noxious. You gotta wear all full safety gear, goggles, respirator, gloves, no latex, and they cure in about, 20 minutes max. Alyssa has, I think she's gonna demonstrate cold casting really quick with urethane resin. Smooth cast 300 and 325 are the most commonly used urethane resins. They're awesome. Crystal Clear, for the record, is also a urethane resin, but it's not awesome. It is decidedly not awesome. It's stuff that you have to put in a pressure chamber. So this stuff, it's straight up one-to-one. It cures white, so you have to add pigment if you want it to be anything different than white.
What she's talking about is Smooth Cast 300, which actually cures white. What I have here is Smooth Cast 325. Now there's a whole bunch of different Smooth Cast. Some cure with shorter time, some are a longer cure. What 325 is something that cures in 10 minutes and it clears. It's meant for tinting. So unlike a Smooth Cast 300, when you use a Smooth Cast 300 and you tint it black, what you're going to get in the end is gray, because that white is gray. However, if you tint this black, it will be black and all the way through. But if you're going for black, go for Smooth Cast Onyx. I mean, this is the type of questions you're going to want to talk to the people at Reynolds and say, my end product needs to be black. What do you suggest? So what we're going to do here, really, really quickly, this is going to be another demo. I'm going to actually demo 2 different methods of cold casting, which we talked about really briefly in the beginning. And also, I'm going to demonstrate what happens if you just use this type of resin and how it works. So,
do you mind if I keep going?
Absolutely.
Okay, so she's going to be mixing down here. It's going to be very similar to the foam, and you are still working against the clock. They make a Smooth Cast 300 quick, as if 10 minutes is not quick enough. If you wanted to cure in 10 seconds, you can use 300 Q. It's literally, I was like, oh yeah, I really want fast cure, it wants to wait around. So I mixed it up and went to pour it, and it cured mid-air. I was like, are you serious right now? What's just happening? So I'm gonna keep going while she's mixing. You can go on the next slide. Keep going. Other stuff. There are a few other things that aren't inherently curative that you should know about. Bondo was the first one. It is a curative chemical, but it's not something that you can just go to Home Depot and get it. You don't have to like go to Smooth On or anything like that. And then epoxy is fantastic. That's a curative chemical. And epoxy glue is just like you mix it together and you glue stuff good. So, there's not much to talk about with that. You can get like epoxy cast, which is neat because you can sculpt it while it's curing, and it's completely safe and everything, and then you get kind of the awesomeness of sculpting or something with the added benefit of a hard final work. You can keep going. Liquid latex. Liquid latex is a curative chemical. It is a lot of times things like silicone are referred to as latex, and that's kind of a misnomer. This stuff is you don't have to mix it together. It just comes in a bottle and you let it dry. It's great for things like foams or anything that's porous, because it fills in those pores and makes it able to be painted and stuff. Like I put it on EVA foam for a Morningstar costume from Firefall, and I was then able to spray paint foam, which you can't do because spray paint eats away foam. So if you want to spray paint foam, Bondo is fantastic, or liquid latex if you want it to have kind of an organic look. Let me keep going. Plasticine, plastiline, Monster Cut is a little bit different. But plasticine and plastiline, prima plastilina, they all kind of have different variations on the exact same thing. It's sulfur-free clay. And I have a block of it sitting on the table. Yeah, thanks. You can get it at Reynolds, you can get it at smoothon.com. It's like $6.50 a block. And it's the best stuff to use if you're going to be making something something sculpted as the original for your mold. This is soft because I was using it for armor, which doesn't need to be very detailed. If you want to do something like a miniature or anything like that, something that's really precise and intricate, you're going to want to use hard to extra hard. And this stuff sucks to work with, I admit that, but the best way to make it really easy to work with is to have a heat gun nearby, because heating it up lowers the viscosity and makes it so that you can actually smooth it and work with it like regular terracotta white clay kind of thing. So it ends up being not so bad if you have something readily available to add heat. Next slide. Full release. This stuff is awesome. We talked about it a little bit. I have the Ease Release by Man in 200, which is the lowest density, and then I also have Universal, which is actually kind of a high density. As I mentioned, Universal is for urethane on urethane, and the Man 200, Ease Release 200, that can be used for something like urethane into silicone, or silicone into latex, or silicone into plaster, something like that, where you're not mixing two things together that are essentially the same. These are cheap too, they're like $13, and they last forever. You can keep going. Yeah, we talked about pigment.
If I can interrupt really briefly, what I wanted to show everyone what I just did is I did the first type of cold casting technique, which is powdering a mold. And I'm going to be using what I mixed here, which is the Smooth Cast 325 in this, which I used for rivets. On half of it, I did a powder. I powdered it with aluminum powder. This stuff is really, it's powder. It's metal. It's literally powder. Wear the mask. And on the other half is just plain. I'm just going to use the Smooth Cast and show you what the buttons look like without having the aluminum cold cast back.
So we touched on pigment. A lot of times you'll end up with this really awesome cast and you'll think, how do I paint it? And the unfortunate reality is that a lot of these things do not take well to paint. Because you're changing them chemically, in the end they end up as a very stable, very final solution. So things like rubber, silicone, and even to an extent resin don't accept paints very well, and especially don't accept acrylic paints very well. You can get away with lacquer-based paints, like spray paints, oil-based paints on resins, as long as you seal it with something. But on things like rubbers and silicones, latexes, foam even, actually foam takes acrylics pretty well. Most of these things, you're going to need to use a pigment, which means you're going to have to break up your casting a little bit. It sounds a lot more awful than it is. Pigments are very friendly. You get to see exactly what it's going to look like as you mix it into part B, which is the most dense liquid that you're working with. And you're gonna get to see immediately what the result's gonna look like, and you'll be able to know it's too dark, I should dilute it. It's too light, I should add more.
This is why you always measure what your mold can take before you use it. So these are really, really tiny. I usually have more than just the 4 at the same time. So I just set that aside.
authored some cheat sheets on silicone, urethane rubber, plaster, urethane resin, and polyester resin, and they can all be found on my DeviantArt, which is lilythebunny.deviantart.com. And Lily the Bunny is also my Twitter name. So if you want to tweet at me, ask me some questions, you're working on a project, want some advice, always answer my mentions. I'm not cool enough to ignore people yet, so you guys, if you want some, you know, and straight.
Yeah, we also are going to start doing live casts, or I am particularly, and I'm very new to a lot of the things they're doing, so it'll be fun to watch me screw up and be like, cool, oops. So I'm going to be putting most of that on facebook.com/Cerberus Productions. I'll be putting all of the live casting on there. And I'm actually going to do a whole other set of Halo armor for a friend with the Rondo technique, all live casting. And I'm starting that next month. So if you guys want to see, that's a very nice, easy, like, sliding method. So if you go to our joint page to check that out, we're always posting things on there. So.
And then Alyssa down here is Propped Up Creations, and she has a dedicated webpage, proppedupcreations.com, as well as a Facebook. So you'll be able to find that easily.
Yeah, that's about it.
That's our panel.